Buddy, welcome to a very special edition of the Awesemo Odds Show. I am Jordan Frank, of course, and I'm joined, as always, by Ben Rasa. Ben, what's going on? I think we hit the big time. We've got a special guest today on the show.
Look who we wrangled in. Yeah, we got the man himself, obviously, Awesemo Alex Baker joining us. We're gonna have some fun. This is a really cool show. Obviously, a favorite time of the year. We've been saying that for weeks. And the three-man is always a good time to break something like this down.
Yeah, that's for sure. Alex, welcome, my friend. How you doing today?
Thanks, man. I'm doing great. Stayed up late last night trying to crunch some projections so that I can share them all with you guys. But today, starting off with the basics of bracket building. So every year, it's always exciting to do it. So I'm excited to talk through our strategies here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. Ben and I have been talking about this moment, I think, for more than a few weeks now. And, we've been looking forward to the tournament starting, and the bracket has finally been released. Everybody's kind of tackling the bracket, trying to figure out what to do with it, where to make contrarian plays and where not to. Before we kind of get into a general strategy, I just kind of wanted to reference real quickly the content that we are producing at the sites. And Alex, you just referenced that we're going to have projections up on the site, which is really exciting. We have a bunch of free content that we are promoting. First of all, we have the video content. We have tonight's show, obviously, and then we're going to have a show on Wednesday and Thursday with some of our talents at Awesemo. Wednesday is going to be kind of a betting / brackets breakdown. Thursday, we're going to do a live before lock style show. Really excited about that before the tournament kicks off. We're going to look at brackets. We're going to look at DFS, maybe a little betting in there as well. On the site, we have kind of a general primer that Ben wrote. That's really great resource. We're going to have daily content once the tournament starts. We also have rankings that Alex is going to put together and actually is up on the site now. So all of this in conjunction with our premium package that we're going to offer, which includes projections, ownership projections. We're really excited to offer a college basketball package. Let's get into kind of a general bracket strategy. When you first watch the show, the Selection Sunday, kind of what's going through your head? Like, are you looking at the one seeds first and kind of narrowing it down from there? Ben, kind of what is your first kind of process when you just first watch the show?
Well, it's a couple things. Obviously, it's who's going to get in, who's going to get out. You see these teams complaining that have like 15 losses, like fools. And then it's kind of where are people situated? You have the one seeds. What region are they in? And then I kind of look at it, a little down the road as like, okay, who is this one seeds possible? Is it an 8 or a 9 seed right in the beginning that may trip them up? Or is it the 2 seed where it's like, wow, these two teams seem like they're already on a crash course? So, you try to take a super macro view of it. Then obviously as we get closer to Thursday, you're taking individual matchups and trying to break those down.
Yeah. How about you, Alex? Kind of what is your thought process on kind of the initial approach and looking at a bracket and trying to really win? I mean, that's what we want to do, right? Is win these bracket pools.
That's right. I think I heard about one that has $1 million up for grabs. So unfortunately, only one of the three of us can win that. So good luck to you guys. So the thing I find about brackets is that you have to make a lot of tough choices right from the get-go. So I found it easier to work backwards from the winner because you get the most points for predicting that. It's going to be the most important for winning your pool. This year we have one pick that's so popular for the winner. I think it's creating some opportunities to kind of be contrarian and apply some DFS strategy. So I think you take the most important choices and then you kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you mentioned obviously the kind of the elephant in the room is that everybody seems to love Duke, and they're always, the most popular public team, and everybody's picking them to win. Can you win a bracket pool contest picking Duke? Is there any way to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you certainly can. It's just, it's similar to DFS. You can sometimes get through with super chalk like that, but long term, if you're playing a top heavy, say GPP, I'm more contrarian in that sense. And something like this isn't, it's not like the NBA playoffs where it's best 4 out of 7. It's one game, and that just adds a total element of variance where honestly the best teams don't always win. So even if you do think Duke is the best team, there comes a point where if they're going to be picked by 40, 50% of the people in your pools, you have to look long and hard about maybe trying to take someone else and hope that Duke gets tripped up earlier.
Yeah, Alex, you kind of agree with that approach?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's all about cost benefit. So usually you're entering a pool with more than a dozen people. So if you pick a play that's maybe 15% to win the championship instead of 25, there's a big opportunity to gain ground on people, even though that your pick is only slightly less probable in the grand scheme of things. I mean, 60% of the time, no one, neither of you or the person who picks the favorite is going to win. So then it comes down to the rest of your bracket. But those times where you hit, that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, I like your approach of working backwards, kind of going the other direction. Do you have, any real strategy in the first round? Are you trying to circle in on upsets, or are you going chalky? Obviously it depends game by game, but do you have kind of an overarching general approach to the first and really second round? Those games are worth the fewest amount of points typically in a bracket pool. Are you as concerned with trying to predict upsets?
So unfortunately, not everyone can be like Ben here and have a big edge over the Vegas odds, or maybe
That's right.
you look for some other sites that give you the chances that a team will win. But for me, I'm just looking at these two teams a lot of the times that I haven't been following, and it's almost like flipping a coin whether you get it right or wrong. So in those cases, I wouldn't sweat it too much. You just pick one of the options. You could, if you want to really optimize your process, you could go to the ownership on Yahoo. They list out for every round how many people have picked whom, and you pick the one that's less popular, and that gives you like a tiny edge. But when it comes to it, that's not going to make or break your pool, probably.
Yeah, how about you, Ben? Obviously, you're watching a ton of these games throughout the year and have a better feel for certainly a lot of the smaller conference teams. What are your thoughts kind of on that process?
Yeah, it's such a fine line because you don't want to be picking all the chalk, but every time you do take an underdog, you're taking a team that probably long term is not the better team. You got to pick your spots carefully. So really, what I try to do in a situation like this, I've seen majority of these teams a lot. Some of them obviously I don't know much about, but I try to put teams in buckets, and kind of label them. Some are super high variance. I'll throw out an example. We were talking before the show. Florida State team, they've showed a ton of talent. They've beat some great teams. They also sometimes look like it's like, how does this team even, have a winning record? They're just so erratic. So that's the kind of team, the range of outcomes I think is actually gigantic. They could make a huge run. They could lose in the first round. So that's someone, that's a high upside kind of play. Then there's other teams that are a lot safer. I feel pretty good about them making it through the first couple games, and you go for there. So, I kind of take it situation by situation, look for a couple places to zig where everyone else zags, a couple double-digit seeds to maybe make a run.
Yeah, and a good resource I think that Alex mentioned is the Yahoo ownership that you just talked about. That's a really good resource. Their data, is being drawn from, certainly tens of thousands of people. So if you can gain just the slightest edge by looking at ownership projections, not projections, ownership numbers that they're providing, I think that is something that's really helpful. And I think in conjunction, like I mentioned earlier, on our site, we're going to have our own projections and ownership projections. And, even in the DFS context, I think you can kind of draw some conclusions on, who people are interested in, kind of where the ownership is going. And as I mentioned, we're going to have a premium package for the first time revolving around college basketball, and that's going to include all of the projections, all the ownership, some additional content that we're going to create, throughout the entire tournament. What I should mention is that we are going to do a promotion revolving around the shows this week certainly this week. And that promotion is going to be for the users and all the viewers on the show to leave a comment. Once the show is ended, leave a comment, not in the live chat, but an actual comment. What is your favorite March Madness memory? And then we'll pick one random viewer and give away a free college basketball premium package. So I feel like I just have to ask you guys then, just to be inclusive. Ben, what's your favorite memory? Can you narrow it down to one single one?
Let's see. My favorite March Madness memory. I would say, well, I'm going to give you two. The Carmelo run at Syracuse is probably my most vivid tournament. I love that team. I loved Carmelo. I was so happy they won. Like in a specific game, it's probably around 10 years ago now, when Adam Morrison was at Gonzaga and they had the game won against UCLA, and it unraveled super late. And Gus Johnson was on the call. One of the most outrageous games, if you know what I'm talking about, just really out there. So that's probably one of the game that resonates the most with me when I think back.
I recall some tears. Is that the game that I'm thinking
on the court? Yeah, the game wasn't over. He was in tears. Darren Collison was on UCLA. Farmer, good team. Great game.
How about you, Alex?
That's a tough one. I'm more of a newer fan, so my favorite one was actually pretty recently. Was when Trey Burke hit that game-tying 3 versus Kansas, I think, in the Final Four.
I almost said that.
Yeah,
I remember that.
That was crazy. I mean, the odds of the comeback were so low because they were down 8 with a minute left, and it was so far of a shot. He was standing 10 feet behind the line.
Yeah.
The only thing that was disappointing is they couldn't complete their run because they lost to Louisville in the final. But if you think about it, Louisville only was able to get there by offering escorts as recruitment methods.
Good point.
They didn't actually win that title according to the record books, so I'm going to count that one for Michigan.
I was going to say, I think that one was vacated, so I'd say you got to win there.
I wish the bookies would cash. I had some futures on Michigan that year. Don't work like that, unfortunately.
I think I actually did too, and I was in Vegas. I remember for that game, and I mean, as you can imagine, the eruption when he hit that shot, it was just pure insanity.
Yeah, that was Spike Allbrook's little one shining moment there. That was a great team.
It was. I think for me, I'll just give my quick 2 cents. I have a few that come to mind, but I think the best memory for me, and I was actually at the game, was Illinois-Arizona from 2005 when Illinois was down 14 or 15 points with about 4 minutes left and came back to win that game. That was one of the most epic games I know that I've ever seen.
4 Horsemen. That was a great team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back kind of into the general bracket strategy, Alex, do you have any kind of, I guess, additional thoughts, as it gets later in the tournament? Certainly the better teams are playing, for sure the chalk is going through, at a high rate. I mean, you're always going to have upsets, but, once you get into the Sweet 16 and Elite 8, typically you're going to have the better teams. Is there kind of an edge that you see in picking those matchups, or how do you approach that?
It all depends on the size of your pool. So if you're trying to win $1 million by getting the perfect bracket, then you want to be a lot more edgy than if you're playing with even maybe 100 people, or maybe your office pool is 20 people. It really changes the amount of reward you get for taking a big risk. It's not hard to remember a lot of years where the Final Four was all 1 seeds. I mean,
yeah.
This year I think there's some pretty quality teams that are lower seeded too, so I don't think it would be quite as likely to happen. But going chalk is a pretty smart strategy, and then the big question is, where are your pivot points? Because you don't want to pick all the favorites. You got to have a couple of measured risks that can pay off really big when they hit. Maybe it's picking Duke to lose in the Final Four or something, because 70% of people hitting the bracket have them in the finals or something like that. Because if you get it right, then you just won the bracket pool probably.
Yeah, it seems like you have to differentiate to some degree, right? Especially to win, those bigger size pools. How about you, Ben? Do you have any specific thoughts on kind of the later round matchups?
So it's to me, I try to bring it back again to DFS in the sense of if you don't like Duke, you can be super vanilla around that, and that's your stand. But if you want, say, you think Duke's going to win, and that's something you don't want to deviate from, then you might want to be a little edgier than most because you have to say, okay, if I hit the winner and it's Duke, that's not going to be enough. You're going to still be competing with a large majority of the people in your pool. So where else can I be different? Alex brings up a good point. It's a fine line. It seems like, oh, these teams make runs, and we've seen it, of course, Loyola last year, obviously VCU, plenty of times, but it's very difficult to pick that type of team. If you have a line on someone, you think they can make a run, absolutely, but more often than not, it's mostly high quality teams that end up coming out of these regions.
Yeah, it seems like those home run kind of picks aren't going to really pan out in the long run. I mean, it just seems like you're throwing money away if you're really going to go after, a double-digit seed and put them in the Final Four. I mean, obviously you're putting all your eggs in that basket because if they lose, you're pretty much toast. So that it's very risky. But, in a larger size pool, a real large one, like when you're trying to win $1 million, maybe like if you catch lightning in a bottle, maybe that is the way to do it. And if you have to beat 100,000 people, that might be the way to do it.
Definitely. I mean, there I get it because you're really trying. It's all or nothing. But if you're playing against 30, 40, 50 people, again, if you have a line on a team, go for it. But more likely than not, I think it's small, calculated risks rather than overhauling your bracket, where you're going to have an underdog in 3 or 4 straight games, and that's really your stand.
Yeah, one like Alex said. I mean, I think clearly you have to get the winner right to stand a chance. One nugget that I came across that I wanted to mention to you guys and kind of get your thoughts. The past 10 years, the champions all had the following in common. They were all top 35 in both adjusted offense and defense efficiency. They had a top 30 strength of schedule, according to Ken Palm. They were all major conferences members, obviously. They all had won a national championship previously, for whatever that's worth. And then the final category is that they had a player who was either first, second, or third team All-American. Now, those haven't been announced yet, but if you kind of, put that into like an all-conference selection, you end up with 6 teams who qualify with all of those criteria. And those 6 teams are Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Michigan State, Kansas, and Maryland. Kind of 2 surprises there. What do you guys think? There's any validity, or is it just pure randomness for 10 years?
Yeah, dude, put it all on Maryland to win the tournament this year.
Terps. It's, I mean, obviously there's something to that, but, I don't think, I'll put it like this. There's a couple teams that aren't on this list, and I don't worry about that. I still think they're just as live as I thought they were before I heard that.
Yeah, me too. It's just kind of an interesting nugget, especially when you're talking Kansas and Maryland.
Yeah.
I think especially Kansas, who, a lot of people, including me, thought they had a pretty down season, by Kansas standards.
Well, here's the thing is so many people make a living out of figuring out the exact chance that someone will win the tournament. So there's no reason for you to have to do that because you can access all that information for free when you log on to Sportsbook. Sportsbooks have to compete with other sportsbooks, so the final price they set on a team winning is going to be pretty close. Obviously, the chances aren't as good as the bets they're offering, but it's going to be very close. So right now, DraftKings has Duke as plus 225. That means they're probably somewhere between a 1-4 and 1-3 chance of winning the tournament. So that's pretty good. The next highest is Gonzaga and Virginia and North Carolina with between 600 to 800. So that means they're probably more like 1-10. And then there's a handful of teams that are in the next tier. So you can pretty much, in my opinion, accept those as accurate information for making your brackets. So you can look at those. You can say, well, I know Gonzaga is plus 600, so that means there's a little bit less than 1-7 chance they're going to win, and you can base your decisions on that.
That's a great point. I mean, I think it's so important to utilize Vegas data when you're, whether DFS or brackets or betting, It's so crucial. And what you'll see often is, we always talk about, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, like these 12-5 matchups or, teams that are prone to be upset. And often in those matchups, you'll find the 12 seed favored against a 5 seed. The average person just sees, the higher seed and automatically assumes they're a better team. Using Vegas data just on a game line, for example, gives you a ton of information. And then when you're looking at the futures, like you mentioned, Alex, I think that shows you a lot too. And kind of what I take from that is a lot of the 2 and 3 seeds are priced a lot higher than I would have expected, which I think just goes to show how kind of top heavy this tournament is this year, with the top seeds being, as dominant as they were this year.
No doubt. I do think there's what I like to do, obviously, is you incorporate all that stuff, and then you just want to identify maybe where there is a little value and maybe where there's, a team like Duke. There's a lot of public money on that. Of course, it's Duke. And that does influence to an extent. Obviously, the books, it's like Tiger Woods in golf. They can price him at kind of whatever they want, and people will bet it just because they want to bet Tiger. So that is something to keep in mind, but absolutely you want to be cognizant of the spreads on these games. You want to be cognizant of, the odds, not even just to win it, just to win their region, so there are odds out there of the odds to come out of, each side. And that's, a way to kind of base how you want to structure it.
Yeah, that's a good segue, because I wanted to kind of give a general overview of each region and kind of get both your guys' thoughts just on, your favorites, kind of a high level analysis of who you think is going to come out of the region, some potential upsets, teams to watch out for. So why don't we start with the East region, which Duke is the number 1 seed. Alex, have you taken a look at that region? Do you have any kind of, general thoughts, teams to watch out for, specific players, that you've projected to do really well?
I haven't been going a ton by region. I've been going more by day. So I've put up my rankings for Thursday, and you can access them on the front page of Osmo.com. It's the main article right now. But I have a couple guys graded out as A pluses in either their projection or value. I haven't been I haven't been as big a fan as Ben or you for sure, but these are guys that I've applied my NBA model to, and they've been coming up big. So the first guy on Thursday that you should look out for is Ja Morant from Murray State. I heard he's a lock for the first few picks in the NBA draft. He's a point guard that dishes out like 10 assists per game. I think the matchup isn't like a huge favor one way or the other, but I think Murray State's favored by a little bit to win the game. And I think that if you want to bet on an exciting game, that'd probably be the one to go with.
Yeah, that matchup is one certainly that we're going to talk about as we delve deeper into the tournament over the week. They play Marquette, who's been, I think, disappointing is kind of a nice way to say it. They had a lot of aspirations to be a really good team this year, and their matchup, Ja Morant against Marcus Howard from Marquette is kind of that top line matchup. And Ben and I have talked a little bit about Ja Morant, how great he is. He's the kind of guy, he shot over 50% from the floor, even though he's shooting, a bunch of threes a game. He's a great shooter, really quick. Ben, have you kind of dug into that game or kind of Morant's matchup against Howard and Marquette?
Yeah, so obviously he's going to be wildly popular. He's wildly expensive, but if you can fit him in, there's no doubt that he's going to get his. Can fill it up. Alex alluded to this. Ton of assists. He rebounds fine. Likes to shoot. Has the ball in his hands. High turnover rate, but that's what you get with a guy like that. He's highly aggressive, highly volatile. I think they're kind of not overmatched in a game like this, but he's going to have to kind of do most of the heavy lifting as he's done throughout the year. Marquette can score. Obviously, Howard is an incredible player on the other side, and they've played certainly a tougher schedule. No doubt about that. But just to, I'll just touch upon Duke's region real quick and go through it. Obviously the thing that stood out for me was, Duke and Michigan State. I thought Michigan State has a real they're basically saying they're the 8th team, which I found a little alarming. If Duke's the number 1 overall seed, I don't really see how that after they beat Michigan. So they do seem like
3
they're on.
times.
Yeah, it's like, Izzo was not happy, and it's hard to blame him. So those two seem. I would venture a ridiculous percentage have either one of those two teams reaching the Final Four. I can't imagine many people have anyone else. The game, I'll just give one game, and it alludes to the dark horse. Yale and LSU, super interesting game in that bracket. LSU has no coach. He's suspended. So they're in turmoil. It looks like one of their key players, Smart, is going to be cleared to play. That helps. But Yale is a quality team. Obviously, they won the Ivy. And Oni, who is their best player, 8,600 on Thursday. I think you can give him a look. Hybrid guard, certainly can dish out some assists, can rebound. They're going to look to him. It's just going to be, can he deal with LSU's size? Obviously, they're just a different animal. The Ivy League teams, you don't see teams like that too often. But this is a game, obviously, spreads around 7.5 right now. We're going to get into that a lot more on Wednesday night. But if you want a dark horse, I think you should give Yale a look as a possible sleeper team, and certainly one that's not going to be too popular.
Yeah, I do like them too, and we'll get into it more throughout the week. But LSU not having a coach seems like a bit of a disadvantage, and they're kind of tail spinning, after the SEC tournament, and they're not in a good place right now.
No, it's
Alex.
Yeah, it's bad.
Actually, one of the guys I really like for DFS is in this game as well. This game has by far the highest over-under on Thursday with 160. The average is probably 140 between all 16 teams.
Mm-hmm.
And Naz Reid is one of the guys that's really popping out for me in DFS because he's priced in the mid-range, but this is a freshman, I think, that has gotten more playing time throughout the season. I'm expecting him to get north of 30 minutes. Doesn't foul at a huge rate, so I'm expecting that to be a possibility that he gets in the high 30s. And I think with the high-paced game and his skill set being kind of a second-round NBA draft pick probably at this point, I think he has the potential to really go off in this game.
Yeah, LSU, Naz Reid is one of a few guys who are really good players, and it kind of goes against what we've been saying, not having a coach being such a negative, but, him and Tremont Waters and Javonte Smart, like we talked about, it's quite a talented group.
Oh, no doubt.
It's a game that, I'm also really interested in seeing how Yale handles, that size. Alex, who was the other A-plus player that you referenced? Was it Naz Reid?
Naz Reid has an A+ for value for me because he's priced at 7,300 on DraftKings, where most guys who are in his projection range are probably more in the 8 to 9K range. And then the final guy that has an A+ value for me is a value pick, Darnell Cowart. Maybe Ben, you have some insight into him.
In a tournament like this, obviously there's guys like him where you just want to be kind of cognizant of okay, who have they played, and then how do they match up. So again, roster construction is going to be important. I'll take it back just briefly because I think touching upon John Morant again is kind of important. If you jam him, you're going to be forcing in. It's just like any sport with an opportunity cost. He may get his, but if you don't have enough value around him, it may not work construction-wise. And that's why it's always good, you check out those value rankings, get that, use it in conjunction with the Vegas odds, with the articles, with obviously our Slack chat, and then you can kind of construct a team based on all that and make sure the pieces fit. So there's definitely some values to be had. It's just, you want to make sure that you're not sacrificing too much by jamming someone up top, or you don't have enough upside if you go too much balanced.
Yeah, I think the thing with the March Madness that I found as kind of a casual basketball fan is that you can't fill your roster with guys that you've heard of. So you got to kind of dig deep and find some guys that are 4 or 5K and just trust that the analysis everyone's been doing on them is right. And that's kind of how DFS goes the first couple rounds.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, in terms of the guy you rushed in Cowards, that's another Murray State guy. And if he can stay out of foul trouble, obviously can be effective. Marquette, when I think of them, I don't think of a physically imposing team. But at the same time, Murray State's in the Ohio Valley. I'm not sure that they face – there's so many teams that just don't have the horses to really compete night in and night out. So it would be an interesting combination if you paired him and Morant up as a starting block. But that, again, we'll dig a little more into that as we go. It's certainly an interesting game, though, on the slate.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump real quickly then into the next region and just kind of get some real general overview thoughts on the West, which is where Gonzaga is. They're playing, almost at home the first two rounds. You've got Syracuse Baylor as the 8-9 team that they're going to be playing, assuming Gonzaga gets through. I know Tyus Battle was ranked pretty highly on your early rankings, Alex. Is there anyone who jumped out in that game for you besides Tyus Battle?
Let me pull my rankings here.
Well, I should say, I guess, how did you grade Tyus Battle? Why don't we just, start with that, and we can go on to kind of a bigger picture of the region.
All right. So Tyus Battle, actually, he's not grading out that great for me. Just a C in overall projection and a B in value. So definitely someone you can roster, but probably not a core play in DFS this week. But it's only because he's priced up pretty high.
Yeah, he did seem like he's priced a little bit too high from kind of my vantage point. Ben, kind of what are your thoughts, I guess, on the region? Are there any games, jumping out to you just from a high level?
So obviously, I want to get into the region. I do want to say that if Syracuse gets through, they play Baylor first. First of all, I hate Baylor. I can't stand them. I hope they get through and we had a question from chat about this, about the Syracuse zone possibly giving Gonzaga problems. And I think that's a really good question. Very interesting. Jordan, you and me have talked about when you only have 2 days to prepare, any slight deviation of what you normally see can be a problem. And we've seen time and time again, Syracuse in particular give teams problems with the zone. So I think that is something that can be concerning. For me, this is the toughest region to break down. I think it's completely wide open. Texas Tech, obviously Michigan, Florida State, they're the biggest threats to Gonzaga. I don't feel super strongly about any of them, to be honest. It's wide open. Prime for someone to make a run. The game that I think is going to be the best game in the first round is Nevada and Florida. True toss-up in my mind. Wolfpack, super experienced, 5 fifth-year seniors, including the twins, against an SEC team in Florida who's got a lot of losses but a lot of quality wins. I have a feeling whoever comes out of that game could give Michigan some trouble in that next second-round matchup. So if I was going to make an aggressive play, I think the West is where I wouldn't fault anyone for kind of being against the grain.
Yeah, there's a lot of good teams that I think can give, certainly if it gets Gonzaga going further in that region, I think they're going to have a tough time. One team that we've talked about a little bit last week is Florida State. You mentioned earlier, Ben, super high variance because, they'll beat Virginia one game and just look like the greatest team. And then, they'll fall to obviously a much weaker team, during the ACC regular season. They're going against a guy, Anthony Lamb, who averages about 21 points a game. I see, Alex, that you have him graded as an A in projections and B in value. He's someone I'm sure a lot of people aren't super familiar with, but he grades out pretty well for you, it looks like.
Yeah, let me just pull up the team here.
Vermont's an interesting team. They're again, dangerous. It's tough. I'm not saying to pick them by any stretch, but at the same time, they're certainly live. And that conference, UMBC, they always seem to give teams trouble. And Lamb is certainly a guy, Alex, I saw your projections. Like 10-5 is pretty pricey, no doubt. But it's not a hard stretch. If he can handle the length of Florida State, which is going to be awkward, it's certainly a starting block if you want to go there.
Yeah, here's the thing with this region that's really jumping out at me is in DFS, you're really looking for games that have a high pace. The over-under in this game is just 133, Vermont versus Florida State, which is one of the lowest in the first round. So I'm not going to I think that these guys aren't going to pop up as much in DFS. Lamb is priced well on FanDuel actually. But I mean, Lamb's numbers look huge. He's got 33% usage. He gets his assist rate is 18%, rebound rate, defensive rebounds 24%. Those are all like top 5% numbers in each category. Well, the assist percent just like that's about average, which is pretty good for someone with that kind of rebounding. And I think that he's going to be huge, but in DFS. But I'm not sure this is the game to target him, just because there aren't enough possessions.
Yeah, I agree with you. It really is key, like we've talked about, to use the Vegas data and look at the over-unders and try and get a sense as to the pace of the game. Some of these teams like Florida State, like some other, like Texas Tech, we haven't talked about, but they are going to grind so hard and play great defense that it's really hard to maximize possessions against them, and you're going to get so many fewer possessions against a team like that. Bouncing to the South region here, from a general overview. Virginia is the number 1 seed. Obviously, everybody knows what happened to Virginia last year as the number 1 seed, getting taken down convincingly, the first number 1 seed ever to lose. You've got Wisconsin, Oregon, which is a real interesting matchup. You have Kansas State, UC Irvine, which I also think is a pretty interesting first-round matchup. Ben, is there any games that you've been looking at in that region early on?
Interesting region. Obviously, you mentioned you got Virginia up there, and you got some teams. UC Irvine's getting a lot of steam in the betting markets already. Games in San Jose, so kind of a pseudo home game for them. Kansas State, we're gonna have to keep an eye on, and this is again, if you're in our Slack, we'll be talking about this. Dean Wade, I don't know what the deal is with his foot. They're gonna need him. And then you've got some other teams. Obviously, Villanova. They don't feel like the defending champs, but they are. They're in the region, and George in our chat brought up Old Dominion Purdue, very interesting game. You can look there. The game and the team that I wanted to talk about, though, is a team that we'll get into more on Wednesday, is Cincinnati. They get Iowa in the first round. Interesting, Iowa shoots a lot of threes. They've had some really big comebacks on the year. They don't seem to put 40 minutes together much. I have a feeling if Cincinnati can survive that, it's going to set up a very good matchup with Tennessee. 2 very physical teams. It's going to be a grinded out, not a great DFS target, but for brackets, that's one that I think will be closer than a lot of people that probably have Tennessee coming out a little further than I do.
Yeah, that's a game I definitely want to dig into a little bit more and talk about as the week progresses. One name that I was looking at DFS-wise is Carson Edwards on Purdue. He's a Wooden Award candidate. He averaged, almost 24 points a game. I think I'm looking. His salary is $9,000, and we have him graded. Alex has him graded, as a B level player. It really seems like you're going to have to kind of choose the top end a little bit more carefully than you would maybe in NBA, where you kind of have a better sense. You're going to have 3 or 4 high value guys, and there's going to be plenty of value guys. Whereas here, I don't know how much value, real low value plays there's going to be. Somebody like him at 9,000, is that someone, that interests you, Alex? Carson Edwards?
Yeah, I think this game kind of has the same problem with pace, but the real issue with March Madness DFS, I'm not sure you can apply the same strategy as NBA, where you pick a lot of really star players and a lot of scrubs, because if anything, the scrubs get even less run in the tournament than they would during the regular season. So it's going to be really hard to find a guy that is low price, that plays a lot of minutes, that's good. So I'm going to probably go for more of a balanced approach, trying to pick out a few players that are lower priced than their salary, but mostly hover around the 5 to 7K range. Maybe pick one guy that's expensive. I actually think there aren't very many injuries at all in play this first day. Maybe some will open up. I hope not, but maybe some of the teams will have some problems, and then on Saturday there'll be some value plays that open up. But I'm not seeing a whole lot right now.
It's true. Just to echo that, this is a 40-minute game, and you're going to see guys play 40 minutes. Like, it's not like the NBA where it's a long haul. Like, if you're not in foul trouble, some of these stars are not coming off the court. It's a short bench. You're going to see 7-8 man total for some of these teams. And again, just to dig in a little more to this game specifically, Carson Edwards, incredible player. Old Dominion, KenPom, 48th ranked defense, 215th ranked offense. So way, way better on the defensive side. 325th in tempo in the country. So that they want to slow this pace as much as possible. And if Purdue is forced to play at that tempo, it's going to be very tough for someone like Edwards who could have a big game, but if the game lands in the 60s, it's tough to hit value on something like that.
Yeah, that pace number is pretty fascinating. There's a lot of teams in that region who play really slow, but I don't think anybody can get to that level of pace. So they're really going to try and force Purdue to play a super slow game and really slow it down. Yeah, you guys bring up great points about the DFS strategy and how it really does differ from NBA, and it's going to be hard to find these super value plays. Obviously we'll keep an eye on injury news, and certainly when we do our live before lock show on Thursday morning, we'll alert everybody if there's any kind of late breaking news, if there is any value that opens up, because it is going to be hard to get to certainly two high level players, high dollars. It's going to be really tough to get to them in this kind of structure. In the Midwest region, the last region, North Carolina is the 1 seed. You've got a couple real interesting matchups. The 5-12 is New Mexico State Auburn. New Mexico State's a team that I like a lot. You certainly have some other quality teams in there. Houston is a fun team. Wofford is a team we've been talking about for a while. Obviously, you have Kentucky at the bottom of the bracket. Ben, what are your kind of general thoughts on this region, and where are you looking, on Monday?
So, yeah, you got obviously North Carolina, Kentucky. Who knows? They seem to play every year in this thing. Always wild games. Wofford is a team that I think a lot of people are into. They've won many. I think it's 20-something in a row. Seton Hall is better than people think, though. I think that's a very fun 7-10 matchup. Kentucky obviously going to get the winner there. The team I wanted to talk about, and, when we, again, on Wednesday, dig into this on the betting side, my favorite bet, I'm just going to tell you right now, is Northeastern. I think they are very live against Kansas, who is not nearly as good as people think. Vic is gone. Azubuike has been gone. And this Northeastern team is a lot better than people think. Experienced, came out of a tough CAA conference, beat College of Charleston, beat Hofstra. Those are teams that could have been in this spot, and they could have been live to win a game here. So that is a team that I'm certainly interested in. Not sure where exactly I'm going to have them falling. You brought up Auburn and New Mexico State. We could see some carnage there, but overall, this is to take down Kentucky, to take down UNC, it's going to take a tall task. They're both very quality teams.
Yeah, I agreed with you. I know Northeastern. I've seen them a little bit. I know they can shoot the three, and that's always dangerous. In a one game playoff where any team can get hot and eliminate a better team. I'm always on board with betting against Kansas and rooting against Kansas, so I'm excited to talk about them on Wednesday.
Beautiful. Yeah, we'll save some of the analysis for that, but that's one. And again, that's where to bring it back to what we were saying at the beginning of the show. Alex was talking about this. You want calculated risks. Putting a team like that in the Final Four, I think, unless you're trying to win the million and you have a line on something like that, it seems aggressive. Maybe having them coming out and it sets the stage, if you like Auburn, to move on. You kind of want to blend it with, okay, if this happens, who would this benefit? Not just the team they play, but maybe down the road. If you think one of the lower seeds gets bounced, it can make the path easier for one of the other teams.
Yeah, and I think, Alex, so what do you think when you're playing DFS? Is that a strategy you should implement where certainly you want to project kind of a game script, but are you really looking for kind of those upset picks and using some of the players from those teams? Is there any reason to, I guess, overvalue players from a team that you think might have a chance to pull off an upset?
I think it's relevant because a lot of times you need a game to be competitive for your guy to reach his full potential. So a lot of these first round games are spreads of 10 or more involving 1 or 2 seeds, and those players on those teams with the 1 or 2 seeds are going to be the most hyped and the most known. The one caveat I have is if you're going to go with one of those guys, it might help a lot to pair them with one or two of the players on the opposing team. They need to keep the game close for you to have a chance to win using that lineup. But going back to this region, I find it a pretty interesting region because it's the most competitive of any region that as far as the Vegas odds. So North Carolina is plus 200, Kentucky is plus 275. But if we're going into value in a bracket challenge, I'm looking at Houston and Iowa State. If I pull up the pick distribution on Yahoo, Houston is only picked 6.5% of the time to make the Final Four. Iowa State's only picked 1.5% of the time. And Houston has plus 500, which means their chance of making the Final Four is more in the region of 10 to 15%. And Iowa State is closer to maybe around 10%. So when you have a team that's 10% to get in the Final Four and they're only being picked 1.5% of the time, that's a really great opportunity in a large field bracket challenge.
Yeah, that's a good point because Houston is a team that, as evidenced by those numbers, is going undervalued and kind of overlooked, even though they had such an incredible season. People just don't realize, from a smaller conference, but they had quality wins. They beat Oregon earlier this year with Bobo on the court. They beat LSU. They beat Cincinnati. That's a team that's really good. And that's kind of what we've been talking about, ways to differentiate, without getting crazy. Like, this is within the realm of possibility, without question, that Houston can get through this region or get to, the regional final. And, maybe you have a hedging opportunity. That's something we can talk about, on the betting show. But that's a great point. I guess just kind of zooming out big picture, do you guys, have you thought about who you like coming out of each region yet? Is it too soon? Do you have any kind of picks that you want to divulge? You want to wait until later in the week, keep everybody on their toes? Ben, what are you thinking, Ben? We'll start with you.
Yeah, obviously, I've gone through a couple iterations of brackets and, things will be tweaked, but I can tell you this much. I don't like Duke as much as everyone else, and I like when that happens because it makes it easier for me to build. It's just like in DFS. If you don't love the chalk naturally in a given slate, it makes it easier because I even if Duke wasn't as popular, I would not be picking them to win. So for me, it's just, okay, if I get that right, how do I keep it balanced enough where I'll reap the benefits of that, but also don't make it where something could really kind of catch up with me. So, a team like Virginia, obviously North Carolina, these other one seeds, I'm going to have to work through it with them, see what's what. And then obviously if you got to work backwards with Duke, if they are going to lose, who realistically could take them down? Is it going to be Michigan State? Is it going to be someone earlier than that? That seems like a stretch. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's just trying to put those pieces in the right order because I have an idea of what I really want to do.
How about you, Alex?
Well, going to Ben's point, I think one of the cool things about the bracket is you don't necessarily need to pick the guy or pick the team that beats the other team. You just need to say I pick Michigan to win, make the Final Four, Michigan State to make the Final Four. Then if Duke loses in one of the preceding games, that makes it a lot more likely, and that's a really good outcome for your bracket still. So I think taking stuff like that into account is pretty useful. If I'm looking at the Yahoo pick distribution, 49.9% brackets so far have Duke to win the tournament, and the next highest is North Carolina at 13.8%. According to DraftKings, Duke is plus 225 bet to win, so that means their chances are probably more like 25%. And I think you can get big leverage just by not picking Duke to win. And then for this perfect bracket, or not the perfect bracket, but the $1 million bracket thing, I think you could just go through the Vegas odds and you find out the spots where there's the biggest difference between the odds and the pick distribution, and you just go with that because that kind of differentiation helps you a lot more in a tournament with 10 million people than it does in a DFS tournament.
Yeah, I think you kind of perfectly hit all the themes that we've been talking about tonight. Really, the Vegas data is so incredibly valuable. this data from Yahoo on ownership is really valuable. I think melding a lot of this data together, you can really gain an edge, whether it is on a big, $1 million pool with Yahoo, or whether it's, at your office pool. I think using this data, you can really leverage against a lot of your opponents. Do you guys have any, I guess, kind of final thoughts? We've talked a lot about how the DFS strategy, overlaps with certainly a bracket strategy, and how we can use Vegas data, certainly with both endeavors. Any kind of parting words of wisdom, Ben, for the folks?
So, again, it's unlike some other sports, especially basketball. Like, this is one game, and it's teams that they found out who they're playing and where they're going yesterday, and they play Thursday. Some teams, the playing games are tomorrow, then they play. It's a quick turnaround, so it's not like conference play where you've seen a team or you saw them last year twice. It creates awkward styles, awkward matchups. So those are just little things, even if you're not too familiar with the teams, try to read a little about what they like to do. Just because I think that, on the whole, more people will just kind of, like game log watch and say, oh, this team, they're really good. This team, not so good. And there's something to that, but there are little matchups, little styles that I think can give you some value in some of these tougher matchups in the early rounds.
Yeah, well said. Before I turn it over to you, Alex, I just want to remind everybody that we will have a premium package up on the site, which includes Alex's projections, ownership projections. We'll have rankings available for free on the site, which they're already up now for Thursday's games. Just a ton of content, a ton of resources to help everybody out and do really well in DFS. And then certainly, you can use a lot of this information to help pick brackets. Alex, kind of what are your final thoughts? And we'll bid everybody adieu for tonight.
I think the brackets are a lot of fun, but even if you make the smartest bracket in the world, it's probably going to be busted on Thursday or Friday. So that's why I got to give my endorsement to DFS, because at least you get to start over fresh every day before your lineup is busted. So that's why I'm really excited to have a product and have you guys working with us on that to be able to give everyone the information they need to play for free with the rankings. And then if you want to up your game, we have a premium package with the full projection and ownership as well. So I think if you want to seriously compete in some of these DraftKings and FanDuel tournaments, that's going to be essential, and I'm looking forward to playing with you guys.
Yeah, us too. And we're looking forward to, providing additional content and the shows that'll be coming up on Wednesday evening and then Thursday early in the morning before the games tip, which of course is like one of the most exciting days of the year. You've got Thursday, Friday, just nonstop hoops. Like I mentioned earlier, we are giving away one of those premium packages that Alex was just talking about, how great they are and how much of an edge it's going to give you over the field in these DraftKings and FanDuel DFS tournaments. To be eligible, make sure you leave a comment, your favorite March Madness memory. We've all given ours. I don't think we are eligible to win, unfortunately, so someone else out there can make it happen. Gentlemen, really love talking with you this evening. Looking forward to producing some more content, talking more, diving deeper into the game-by-game breakdown and talking more about DFS as well.
Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Have a good evening, guys. Talk to you soon.